Hey everyone, tonight we're going to embark on a rather peculiar journey, one that will have you tiptoeing through the echoes of millennia, feeling the cool, sun-baked marble beneath your bare feet, and perhaps even catching a whiff of ancient dust motes dancing in the golden light. We're about to delve into the whimsical world of ancient Greek architecture, a realm where stone isn't just stone, but a canvas for dreams, a testament to human ingenuity, and sometimes, frankly, a massive headache for the folks who had to haul it around. You might think you know temples, but tonight you're going to learn about the quirks, the whispers, and the sheer audacity of a civilization that built structures so enduring. They still stand as monuments to their peculiar genius. And let's be honest, after an hour of me whispering about triglyphs and metopes, you probably won't survive this without a deep, comforting sleep. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to imagine our little sleepy community stretching across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on a windswept plateau, the air crisp with the scent of thyme and distant sea spray. This isn't the glorious Athens you might imagine. Not yet. You're much, much earlier, at the very dawn of what would become Greek architectural thought. Forget grand marble temples for a moment. What you're seeing around you are simple, almost humble structures. Think circular huts, perhaps with conical roofs made of thatch or mud, nestled into the landscape. These were the very first stirrings, the initial human impulse to create shelter that was more than just a cave. This era, often called the Early Bronze Age, is where the earliest architectural echoes begin. While not architecture in the classical sense, these primitive dwellings were the foundations. They reveal a crucial mainstream historical fact: the Greeks, like all early civilizations, began by addressing fundamental needs for shelter and security. But here's a quirky tidbit: some of these very early structures, unearthed by archaeologists, show signs of quite sophisticated ventilation systems for their time. Perhaps just a few strategically placed holes, but certainly indicating a thoughtful approach to interior comfort. Imagine, even back then, people were thinking about how to keep cool on a hot Mediterranean night. You wonder if they ever had a grumpy ancestor complain about a draft, just like you might today. As you wander through these imagined early settlements, you notice how the structures often mimic natural forms, blending into the hillsides. There's a quiet respect for the land, almost as if they were trying to be invisible. You see rudimentary defensive walls starting to appear, not grand, but enough to offer a sense of safety from wandering beasts or less than friendly neighbors. These aren't the mighty fortresses you'll encounter later, but they are the concept in its infancy, a simple barrier against the unknown. The materials are entirely local timber from nearby forests, clay dug from the earth, and stones gathered from riverbeds. There's a pragmatic beauty to it, a direct response to the available resources. You might pick up a smooth, sun-warmed pebble and wonder if it was once part of a wall, or perhaps just a tool for shaping another. This connection to the immediate environment is a hallmark of early building. Historians still argue whether these earliest forms of communal building stem purely from necessity, or if there was an underlying, almost subconscious, artistic drive at play. Was it simply about keeping the rain out, or was there already a nascent desire for form, for a pleasing shape? Even in the most basic hut, perhaps it was a bit of both, a delightful blend of the practical and the poetic, much like how you might arrange your pillows just so before drifting off to sleep. You can almost hear the soft thud of a stone being set, the rhythmic scrape of a wooden tool, as these earliest builders slowly, deliberately began to craft their world, laying the groundwork for the monumental wonders to come. As your journey continues, you feel a subtle shift in the air, a sense of growing scale and ambition. The humble huts of the earliest settlements fade, replaced by something far more imposing. You're now standing before the formidable walls of Mycenae, A place whispered about in legends, a stronghold that seems to defy logic. These aren't just walls, they are colossal ramparts, built from massive, irregular blocks of stone, fitted together with such precision that you can barely slip a blade of grass between them, and remarkably, without any mortar. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. These are the famed Cyclopean walls, named because later Greeks believed only mythical giants, the one-eyed Cyclops, could have possibly moved such immense stones. You walk alongside these towering structures, feeling dwarfed by their sheer bulk. Each stone can weigh several tons, some even more, making you wonder aloud, how on earth did they do that? It's a question that still puzzles historians and archaeologists today. You might even playfully try to nudge one of the smaller stones, only to realize it's utterly immovable. This era, the Late Bronze Age, often called the Mycenaean period, represents a significant leap in architectural capability and strategic thinking. Here's a quirky tidbit to tickle your imagination. Some theories suggest that a sophisticated system of ramps and levers, possibly aided by teams of oxen and hundreds of human laborers, was used to hoist these gargantuan blocks into place. Imagine the coordinated effort, the rhythmic chants, the sheer brute force applied over months, perhaps years, to construct these fortifications. It's enough to make your own muscles ache just thinking about it. You might even hear the ghostly echo of a foreman shouting, "Just a little more. Lads, mind your toes." These walls weren't just for show, they were a testament to power and a necessity for survival. Mycenae was a heavily fortified city, perched atop a hill, its walls a clear declaration of its dominance and its need for defense in a turbulent world. You can practically feel the tension in the air, imagining the lookouts peering over the battlements, ever vigilant. The very massiveness of the stone was meant to intimidate, a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. Inside the walls, you explore the remains of the Lion Gate, a monumental entrance framed by two immense lionesses carved in relief above the doorway. This is one of the earliest examples of monumental sculpture in Greek lands, and it speaks volumes about the Mycenaeans' artistic aspirations. Even amidst their focus on defense, the lions, once thought to protect the city, now stand as silent guardians of history, their heads long since lost to time, leaving you to imagine their fierce visages. You also notice the distinctive tholos tombs, or beehive tombs, outside the main citadel. These are circular chambers, often partially subterranean, with corbelled roofs that rise to a point like a beehive. The most famous, the Treasury of Atreus, is a marvel of engineering, a massive, unmortared dome, demonstrating an impressive understanding of load-bearing structures. It's almost unsettlingly quiet inside, the air cool and still, making you wonder about the ancient rituals performed here. Historians still argue whether the Mycenaean civilization collapsed due to internal strife, natural disaster, or invasion by the enigmatic sea peoples. Whatever the cause, the monumental architecture of Mycenae stands as a stark reminder of a powerful, advanced culture that eventually faded, leaving behind only these imposing stone whispers and a legacy of construction techniques that would, in time, be refined by those who came after. You find yourself leaning against one of these massive stones, feeling its ancient coolness, and the sheer weight of history pressing in. You've moved past the daunting walls of Mycenae, and now you find yourself in a fascinating transitional period, a bridge between the Bronze Age might and the classical elegance to come. Imagine standing in an early settlement, not yet a bustling city, but a cluster of buildings that hint at future grandeur. What you're seeing here, a crucial mainstream historical fact, is the profound influence of one wooden construction on the development of later stone temples. It's like watching a caterpillar slowly transform into a butterfly, except the caterpillar is made of timber and the butterfly is pure marble. Think about it before they mastered the art of carving colossal stone blocks and fitting them with exquisite precision. The Greeks were master carpenters. Their earliest temples, And indeed, many of their larger communal buildings were crafted from wood. You can almost smell the freshly cut pine and cedar, hear the rhythmic thud of axes, and imagine the simple joinery holding these structures together. The basic forms, the upright posts, the horizontal beams, the pitched roofs were all established in wood. Now here's a quirky tidbit. Some archaeologists have discovered remnants of these early wooden temples, identified by the post holes left in the ground. These ghost structures, invisible to the casual eye, reveal a surprising amount about their design. For example, the very fluting you see on later stone columns, those vertical grooves, are thought by some to be a direct stylistic echo of how carpenters would plane or carve logs to remove bark and create a smoother, more aesthetically pleasing surface. It's a bit like how modern cars still have grills, even though they no longer need to cool a front-mounted engine. You might even find yourself tracing an imaginary flute on a nearby tree trunk, trying to feel the connection. As you look around, you realize that when the Greeks transitioned to stone, they didn't completely abandon their wooden heritage. Instead, they translated it. The robust, sturdy appearance of the Doric order, which you'll encounter soon, is a prime example. Its strong, unfluted, initially columns and simple capitals are reminiscent of thick tree trunks supporting a roof. The triglyphs and metops of the Doric frieze, which appear to be decorative elements, are actually stone translations of the ends of wooden beams, triglyphs and the open spaces between them, metopes that would have been present in a timber roof structure. It's a remarkable example of dysmorphy, where an ornament or feature retains the form of an older, no longer functional element. You might even chuckle imagining an ancient Greek architect, perhaps a bit set in his ways, sketching out plans and insisting, yes, but it simply must look like it's made of wood, even if it's solid rock. This stubborn adherence to established forms, even when materials change, speaks to a deeply ingrained aesthetic. Historians still argue whether this direct translation was purely aesthetic, a matter of tradition and visual comfort, or if there were practical considerations involved in replicating familiar forms with new materials. Was it about reinforcing cultural continuity, or simply the path of least resistance in design? Regardless, this fundamental connection between wood and stone highlights the iterative nature of architectural innovation. You can feel the slow, deliberate progression, each new structure building upon the lessons and forms of its predecessors, like a story unfolding one carefully placed stone at a time. The echoes of those original timber beams still resonate through the marble halls to come, leaving behind the ghostly imprints of timber structures. You feel the ground solidify beneath your feet, for you are now stepping into an era where stone truly comes into its own. This is where the story of classical Greek architecture truly begins to take shape, and your attention is drawn to a robust, imposing form that dominates the landscape, the Doric order. This is a crucial mainstream historical fact. The Doric order is the oldest and arguably the most distinctive of the three classical Greek architectural orders, characterized by its sturdy simplicity and powerful presence. Imagine standing before a temple, perhaps the Temple of Hera at Olympia or the Temple of Apollo at Corinth. You look up, and the columns rise directly from the stylobate, the temple's platform, without a base. They are thick, tapering upwards with a subtle swelling known as henosis, which you'll appreciate more later for its optical wizardry. The shafts are adorned with sharp, vertical grooves called fluting, and they are crowned by a remarkably simple capital, a plain, cushion-like echinus supporting a square abacus. It's an architecture of unyielding strength, almost severe in its elegance. You might find yourself nodding in appreciation for its no-nonsense attitude. There's something undeniably masculine about the Doric, a sense of grounded power. It doesn't need frills or flourishes to make its statement. Its beauty lies in its proportion, its solidity, and its undeniable presence. It's the ancient Greek equivalent of a strong, silent type who can still lift a horse. Here's a quirky tidbit about the Doric order, while its origins are debated. Some scholars believe its name comes from the Dorians, a Greek tribe, suggesting a connection to their perceived rugged character. Imagine an ancient architectural critic stroking his beard, declaring, "Ah, yes, very Doric solid, dependable, perhaps a tad unrefined, but certainly gets the job done." You might even imagine a rivalry between architectural schools, with one group sneering at the other's lack of proper Doric gravitas. Above the columns, you observe the entablature, which is the horizontal structure supporting the roof. The Doric entablature is unmistakable with its triglyphs and minor metopes. In the triglyphs are vertical blocks with three vertical bands, and they alternate with the metopes, which are square panels that were often sculpted. Remember our earlier chat about wooden architecture? These elements are thought to be the stone translations of the ends of wooden ceiling beams and the spaces between them. A perfect example of skeuomorphy. It's like your brain suddenly clicking. Ah, so that's why they look like that. The sense of order and repetition is profound. Column, triglyph, metope, column, triglyph, metope. It creates a powerful rhythm that leads your eye around the structure. There's a mathematical precision to it, even in its apparent simplicity. The architects of these temples weren't just throwing stones together. They were applying sophisticated principles of proportion and harmony. Historians still argue whether the Doric order evolved organically from earlier timber structures or if it was a more deliberate, codified invention. Was it a slow, iterative refinement over centuries, or a sudden burst of architectural genius that established its rules? Regardless, its emergence marked a pivotal moment, laying down the fundamental principles that would influence all subsequent Greek architectural development. You feel a deep satisfaction looking at these sturdy forms, realizing that you're witnessing the bedrock upon which an entire architectural civilization was built. As the sturdy, almost Spartan forms of the Doric order recede slightly in your mind's eye, a new, more graceful silhouette begins to emerge on the horizon. You're now encountering the Ionic order, a crucial mainstream historical fact that represents a significant shift in Greek architectural aesthetics. If the Doric was the brawny elder brother, the Ionic is undoubtedly the elegant, perhaps slightly more sophisticated sibling. You find yourself before a temple like the Temple of Athena Nike on the Athenian Acropolis, or the majestic Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, though only ruins remain today. The first thing that catches your eye, unmistakably, is the volute. These are the distinctive spiral-shaped scrolls that adorn the capital of each column, resembling ram's horns or perhaps unfurling papyrus scrolls. They add an immediate sense of refinement and decorative flourish that was largely absent from the Doric. You might even find yourself tracing the imaginary spirals in the air, mesmerized by their symmetry. Unlike the Doric column, which springs directly from the stylobate, the Ionic column proudly stands on a molded This base often consists of a series of convex and concave rings, giving the column a sense of upward lift and delicacy. The column shaft itself is typically more slender than its Doric counterpart, and its fluting is deeper and narrower, creating more pronounced shadows and a sense of verticality. It's a bit like comparing a rugged mountain path to a gracefully winding river. Here's a quirky tidbit about the Ionic order. Its origins are generally traced to the Eastern Greek world, specifically Ionia, modern-day Western Turkey, and nearby islands. This region was more open to influences from the Near East and Egypt, leading to a more ornate and decorative style. Imagine the Doric architects, rooted in mainland Greece, looking across the Aegean and muttering, "Look at those Ionians, always with their fancy swirls. What's wrong with a good honest cushion capital?" It's a delightful thought, picturing ancient designers debating aesthetics over a cup of watered wine. The entablature of the Ionic order also differs significantly. While it still has a frieze, it's typically a continuous band, often richly sculpted with narrative scenes, rather than the alternating triglyphs and metopes of the Doric. Below the frieze is a three-banded architrave, giving the impression of layered beams. The overall effect is lighter, more ornate, and perhaps a touch more luxurious. It whispers rather than shouts. You notice how the volutes allow for a more flexible orientation. They look good from two main sides, unlike the Doric capital, which is the same all around. This subtle difference becomes important when placing columns at corners, a design challenge that the Ionic order grappled with and sometimes solved with ingenious corner volutes that faced outwards on two sides. It's a testament to the architect's problem-solving skills, even in the realm of aesthetic details. Historians still argue whether the Ionic order represents a purely aesthetic evolution, a move towards greater elegance and decorative complexity, or if it also reflects deeper cultural and regional differences between the mainland Greeks and their Eastern counterparts. Was it simply a matter of taste, or did it embody distinct regional identities and interactions with other cultures? Regardless, the emergence of the Ionic order broadened the architectural vocabulary of the Greeks, offering a powerful alternative to the Doric and setting the stage for even more decorative possibilities. You can almost feel the gentle breezes of the Aegean, carrying new ideas and forms from distant shores, shaping the very stones you perceive. Having experienced the grounded power of the Doric and the refined elegance of the Ionic, you now find yourself witnessing the grand finale of Greek architectural innovation, the Corinthian order. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. The Corinthian order is the most ornate and decorative of the three classical Greek orders, characterized by its elaborate capital adorned with acanthus leaves. It's the showstopper, the one that says, "Look at me," and perhaps, just perhaps, gasp a little. You stand before a structure, perhaps the temple of Olympian Zeus in Athens, or a later Roman building that adopted the style as the Romans absolutely adored it. Your eyes are immediately drawn upwards, past the slender, often fluted column shaft, to the magnificent capital. It's a riot of carved detail, dominated by two rows of stylized acanthus leaves. Curling gracefully upwards, from amidst these leaves, slender tendrils and volutes emerge, sometimes ending in small helices that curl under the corners of the abacus. It's undeniably botanical, a stone garden blooming atop a column. You might even feel a sudden urge to run your fingers over the intricate carvings, if only they weren't miles away in ancient Greece. The Corinthian capital isn't just pretty, it's a masterpiece of stone carving, demonstrating an incredible level of craftsmanship and artistic ambition. Unlike the Doric and Ionic capitals, which have a clear front and back or two main sides for Ionic, the Corinthian capital is designed to be viewed from all four sides. This makes it incredibly versatile, perfect for internal colonnades or freestanding columns where views from multiple angles are important. It's the architectural equivalent of a 360-degree selfie taker. Here's a quirky tidbit about the Corinthian order's origin. Famously recounted by the Roman architect Vitruvius, he attributed its invention to the sculptor Callimachus in the late 5th century BCE. The story goes that Callimachus saw a basket left on a young girl's grave, covered by a tile, with an acanthus plant growing up around it, its leaves curling around the basket. Inspired by this humble sight, he created the capital. You might wonder if Callimachus then immediately filed for a patent, or if he just drew it on a napkin and hoped for the best. It's a charming tale, whether entirely true or merely a delightful anecdote. The column shaft of the Corinthian order is typically the slenderest of the three, and it almost always features fluting. It often rises from a molded base, similar to the Ionic, further emphasizing its elegance and upward thrust. The entablature above a Corinthian column is generally more elaborate than that of the Doric, often incorporating elements like dentils, small block-like projections, and richly carved friezes, sometimes with more complex moldings. You might notice that while the Corinthian order appeared in Greece relatively late, largely in the 4th century BCE and beyond, it never achieved the widespread dominance that the Doric and Ionic orders did in their prime. It was perhaps considered a bit too flamboyant by the more restrained Greek sensibilities, especially for monumental public buildings like temples. Historians still argue whether its later, widespread adoption by the Romans diminished its Greekness or simply showcased its inherent adaptability and appeal. Was it a pure Greek invention that was merely adopted by Rome? Or did its full potential only truly blossom under Roman patronage, often integrated into more complex architectural schemes? Whatever the scholarly debate, the Corinthian order stands as a testament to the ever-evolving nature of artistic expression. It signals a move towards greater decorative freedom and a desire for opulent detail, foreshadowing the Hellenistic and Roman eras where architectural grandeur would know few bounds. You feel a sense of completion as you gaze upon its intricate beauty, recognizing that you've now encountered the full classical Greek architectural family. Having now journeyed through the distinct personalities of the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian orders, your focus now narrows, moving from the external shell of these magnificent structures to their very core. You are about to step inside the Kella, a crucial mainstream historical fact that refers to the principal interior room of a Greek temple, housing the cult statue of the deity to whom the temple was dedicated. This isn't just a room, it's the Sacred Heart, the innermost sanctum, where the divine was believed to reside. Imagine approaching a grand temple, its columns standing proud, casting long shadows. You pass through the exterior colonnade, perhaps under a richly adorned portico, and then you enter. The air inside the cella often feels different, cooler, quieter, more reverent. It's usually a long, rectangular space, designed to be dark and mysterious, a stark contrast to the brilliant sunlight outside. There might be a sense of hushed expectation, a quiet awe that settles over you. At the far end of this dim space, you would often find the magnificent cult statue. This wasn't merely a piece of art, it was considered the living representation of the god or goddess, crafted from materials like gold, ivory chryselephantine, or bronze, often colossal in scale. Think of Phidias's Athena Parthenos, a towering, gleaming figure within the Parthenon. You can almost feel the presence, the sheer power emanating from such an effigy. Here's a quirky tidbit: while the cult statue was the main attraction, the cella wasn't typically a space for public worship in the way a modern church nave is. Only priests or a select few initiates were allowed regular access. Most public rituals and sacrifices happened outside the temple, at an altar positioned in front of the building. So, while you might imagine throngs of worshippers jostling for a glimpse, the cella was more of an exclusive abode for the deity, a very private residence indeed. You might even chuckle at the idea of the gods having their own no entry for commoners policies. The cella often housed other sacred objects, votive offerings, and sometimes even treasuries. The temple, therefore, served not only as a divine dwelling, but also as a secure vault for the community's most precious possessions. The walls of the cella were typically plain, sometimes plastered and painted, but the emphasis was always on the cult statue. In larger temples, rows of smaller internal columns might have lined the cella to help support the massive roof, creating a kind of inner colonnade that framed the deity. These columns were often of the same order as the exterior columns, maintaining a sense of architectural consistency. You might notice how the darkness inside the cella, combined with the often closed or dimly lit conditions, would have created an almost otherworldly experience for those few allowed to enter. The flicker of oil lamps, the scent of incense, and the looming presence of the statue would have contributed to a powerful spiritual atmosphere. It's a carefully crafted sensory experience, designed to evoke reverence and wonder. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of the cella was purely to house the cult statue as a divine home, or if it also served a more practical function as a secure treasury for valuable offerings and communal wealth. Was the religious significance paramount, or did the practical considerations of safeguarding riches also play a significant role in its design and purpose? Regardless, the cella was undeniably the functional and spiritual heart of the Greek temple, a place of profound significance where the earthly and the divine were believed to converge. You find yourself standing in this quiet, imagined space, feeling the weight of ancient belief settle around you. Stepping out of the mysterious calm of the cella, your gaze is immediately drawn upwards, past the majestic columns, to the triangular spaces nestled beneath the pitched roof at the front and back of the temple. These are the impediments, a crucial mainstream historical fact that refers to the triangular gables often filled with magnificent relief sculpture, serving as the primary canvas for narrative art on Greek temples. They are the temple's storytellers, proclaiming myths and deeds in stone to the heavens. Imagine the Parthenon's west pediment, depicting the fierce contest between Athena and Poseidon for patronage of Athens. You can almost see the dynamic tension, the swirling drapery, the powerful musculature of the gods and heroes as they vie for supremacy. These sculptures were not static. They were vibrant, often painted in bright colors, and filled with a dramatic energy designed to capture the eye and imagination of anyone approaching the temple. You might find yourself craning your neck, trying to absorb every detail, much like an ancient citizen would have. The challenge for the sculptors was immense. They had to create a coherent narrative within a triangular space, which meant figures had to be cleverly arranged to fit the decreasing height toward the corners. This often led to reclining figures in the very tips, while standing or kneeling figures occupied the center. It's a bit like trying to fit all your holiday souvenirs into a single, oddly shaped suitcase. It requires a lot of creative packing. Here's a quirky tidbit about pedimental sculpture to ensure visibility from the ground. The figures were often carved in such high relief that they were almost three-dimensional, sometimes even detached from the background entirely. This created deep shadows and highlights, making the drama pop even from a distance. Imagine the effort involved in carving away so much stone, carefully bringing each god and mortal to life, knowing that most viewers would only see them from afar. You might even wonder if a sculptor ever accidentally knocked off a limb, prompting a frantic search for a suitable piece of marble glue. The themes depicted on the pediments were almost always mythological, closely tied to the deity housed within the temple or to the founding myths of the city. For example, the east pediment of the Temple of Zeus at Olympia depicted the preparation for the chariot race between Pelops and Oenomaus, a foundational myth for the Olympic Games themselves. These visual narratives served as public art, moral lessons, and expressions of civic pride, teaching and entertaining simultaneously. You can almost hear the murmuring of ancient crowds discussing the latest pedimental masterpiece, debating the quality of the carving, or arguing over the correct interpretation of a mythological scene. This wasn't just decoration, it was public discourse rendered in marble, a powerful form of communication in a largely pre-literate society. Historians still argue whether the pedimental sculptures were primarily meant to be seen and understood by the general populace, or if their intricate details were more for the gods and for a select few initiates who could appreciate their full complexity from closer vantage points. Was their didactic function paramount, or were they more a testament to the city's wealth and artistic patronage? Regardless, these monumental narrative panels stand as a testament to the Greek mastery of storytelling through sculpture, transforming mere stone into living, breathing drama high above the heads of mortals. You feel a sense of profound admiration for the artists who could command such narratives within such challenging geometric constraints. As your gaze lowers from the dramatic heights of the pediments, it settles upon another remarkable surface, a continuous band of sculpture running just below them, often circling the entire structure, or at least prominent parts of it. This is the friso, a crucial mainstream historical fact that in Ionic and sometimes Corinthian architecture refers to a continuous horizontal band of sculpture. Unlike the discrete panels of the Doric metopes, it's like an ancient comic strip, unfurling a story as you walk around the temple. Imagine yourself at the Parthenon again, but this time, you're looking closely at the celebrated Panathenaic frieze that once adorned the outer wall of its cella. You see a grand procession citizens, horses, chariots, sacrificial animals, and even gods, all moving in a solemn yet dynamic parade. This isn't just a static tableau, it's a living narrative depicting a specific event or a recurring ritual or a mythological sequence that unfolds before your eyes. You might find yourself slowly walking alongside it, letting your imagination fill in the missing colors and the sounds of the ancient festival. The beauty of the continuous frieze is its fluidity. Unlike the self-contained scenes of the metopes, here the action flows from one end to the other, creating a sense of movement and grand scale. Sculptors had to master the art of composition within a long, narrow format, ensuring continuity and variety simultaneously. It's a bit like directing a very long parade where every participant is made of marble. Here's a quirky tidbit. The Panathenaic frieze is unusual because it depicts what is believed to be a contemporary event, the Panathenaic procession, rather than just a purely mythological scene. While many friezes did depict myths, like the Gigantomachy on the Siphnian treasury at Delphi, this inclusion of civic life on such a prominent sacred building was quite bold for its time. Imagine if your local city hall had a massive sculpture depicting the annual town fair on its exterior. You might even chuckle at the thought of ancient Athenians arguing about whether the sculptor captured the likeness of their neighbor's prize goat accurately. The relief on these friezes could vary from very low, almost painterly depth, to much higher relief, creating a play of light and shadow that brought the figures to life. The skill required to carve such intricate detail, often at a height where it was not easily seen, speaks volumes about the dedication of the craftsmen and the aspirations of their patrons. They weren't just building for human eyes, they were building for eternity, and perhaps for the gods themselves. The themes chosen for friezes were always significant. They might illustrate the birth of a deity, the triumph of gods over giants, or the glorious history of a city and its heroes. They served as constant reminders of a community's identity, its values, and its relationship with the divine. It was public education and religious instruction, all rolled into one magnificent stone ribbon. Historians still argue whether the Parthenon frieze truly depicts the Panathenaic procession or a more idealized, mythological interpretation of it. Was it a literal snapshot of Athenian life, or a symbolic representation of their civic and religious ideals? Regardless, the continuous frieze offered Greek architects and sculptors an unparalleled opportunity to tell complex stories on a grand scale, inviting the viewer to engage with the narrative as they moved around the sacred space. You feel a profound connection to these ancient storytellers, whose work still whispers tales across millennia. Having appreciated the flowing narratives of the continuous frieze, your attention now shifts to a different kind of sculptural storytelling, one that is distinctly characteristic of the Doric order. You're now focusing on the metopes, a crucial mainstream historical fact that refers to the square, sculpted panels that alternate with the triglyphs in the Doric frieze. Unlike the continuous frieze, each metope presents a discrete, self-contained scene, like individual frames in a historical comic book. Imagine looking up at a Doric temple, perhaps the Temple of Zeus at Olympia, or the Parthenon, which uniquely combines Doric triglyphs and metopes with an internal Ionic frieze. Above the columns, you see the repetitive rhythm of triglyph, metop. As your eyes land on each metop, you discern a distinct, often dramatic moment captured in stone. One might show a hero battling a centaur, the next a god wrestling a giant, and another on perhaps a scene from the Trojan War. Each is a mini-drama, a burst of action frozen in time. The challenge for the sculptors of metopes was to convey a complete narrative or a powerful action within a strict square format. This required masterful composition, often focusing on one or two central figures, with powerful diagonals and dynamic poses to suggest movement and conflict. It's like trying to tell a compelling story in a single, perfectly framed photograph. You might find yourself leaning your head slightly, trying to get just the right angle to catch the full intensity of the sculpted moment. Here's a quirky tidbit about metopes. While they are often heavily sculpted, early Doric temples sometimes had plain, undecorated metopes. This suggests that the decorative aspect was an evolution, perhaps as cities grew wealthier and more ambitious. It also means that the decision to fill them with sculpture was a deliberate artistic choice, not a structural necessity. Imagine the architectural committee meeting. Should we bother with the sculptures this year, or just leave them blank? The budget's a bit tight. You can almost hear the sighs of exasperated artists. The themes depicted on metops were almost exclusively mythological, often illustrating cycles of heroic deeds or battles between order and chaos. For instance, the metops of the Parthenon depict the Gigantomachy battle of gods and giants, the Amazonomachy battle of Greeks and Amazons, the Centauromachy battle of Lapiths and centaurs, and scenes from the Trojan War. These themes were not just decorative, they carried profound symbolic weight, representing the triumph of civilization over barbarism, of reason over primal instinct. You can almost feel the kinetic energy radiating from these panels. Even centuries later, the figures are often carved in high relief, creating strong contrasts of light and shadow, making them visually striking even from a distance. The repetitive rhythm of the metops, each presenting a distinct moment, creates a cumulative effect, a grand epic told in powerful, isolated bursts. Historians still argue whether the choice of specific mythological cycles for metopes reflected particular political messages or simply universal truths about human struggle and divine intervention. Were they allegories for contemporary events or timeless narratives meant to inspire moral fortitude? Regardless, the metopes provided an incredibly effective means for the Greeks to adorn their most sacred buildings with a rich tapestry of visual storytelling, transforming functional architectural elements into profound artistic statements. You find yourself contemplating these individual scenes, appreciating the condensed power of each one, a testament to ancient Greek storytelling ingenuity. Having marveled at the narrative sculptures of the pediments and metops, you now turn your attention to something far more subtle, something that speaks to an extraordinary level of sophistication in ancient Greek architectural thought. You're about to discover the world of optical illusions and refinements, a crucial mainstream historical fact where Greek architects deliberately introduced subtle curves and tilts into their temples to counteract natural optical distortions and make their buildings appear perfectly straight and harmonious to the human eye. It's like discovering they had a secret superpower, long before special effects. Imagine standing at a distance from a majestic temple, perhaps the Parthenon, which is the quintessential example of these refinements. You might assume its lines are perfectly straight, its columns perfectly vertical, its platform perfectly flat, but lean closer, examine it with a discerning eye, and you'll uncover the secrets. Nothing is truly straight. It's a delightful deception, a masterful manipulation of your perception. The most famous of these refinements is entasis num. You recall I mentioned it briefly with the Doric column. It's the subtle swelling or bulge in the middle of a column shaft, designed to counteract the optical illusion that perfectly straight columns appear to narrow in the middle. Without entasis, a straight column would look oddly concave, almost as if it's pinching in. With entasis, it appears perfectly straight to your eye, a testament to their keen observation. It's a bit like a magician performing a trick right before your eyes, and you're none the wiser until someone points it out. Here's a quirky tidbit: the stylobate, the platform on which the columns stand, is not flat, it's actually slightly convex, curving upwards towards the center. This incredibly subtle curve, often just a few inches over a long distance, serves two purposes. It prevents the illusion of the long platform sagging in the middle, which a perfectly flat line would appear to do, and it helps shed rainwater. Imagine the precision required to cut and lay enormous blocks of marble with such an exact, imperceptible curve. You might even find yourself instinctively checking the ground beneath your feet, just in case your floor is secretly curved too. Even the columns themselves are not entirely vertical. They lean inwards, ever so slightly. If you could extend the lines of the Parthenon's columns upwards, they would all eventually converge thousands of feet above the temple, creating an imaginary pyramid. This slight inward tilt gives the building a sense of stability and prevents it from appearing to splay outwards, particularly at the corners. It's a masterful touch, giving the massive structure a surprising feeling of organic growth rather than rigid geometry. You might also notice variations in the spacing of columns or the width of metopes, especially at the corners, all designed to maintain visual consistency and prevent awkward gaps or compressions that would otherwise appear. These weren't random errors. They were deliberate, painstakingly calculated adjustments. Historians still argue whether these optical refinements were primarily for aesthetic purposes, to create a sense of visual perfection and harmony, or if they also had a structural function, contributing to the building's stability in subtle ways. Was it pure art, pure science, or an intricate blend of both? Regardless, the mastery of these subtle manipulations showcases an astonishing understanding of human vision and a relentless pursuit of architectural perfection, distinguishing Greek builders as true masters of their craft. You feel a deep respect for their ingenious minds, creating beauty that transcends the merely visible. You've just glimpsed the hidden artistry of Greek architectural refinements, and now you stand before the culmination of all that knowledge and skill, the very embodiment of the Doric order's grandeur and the pinnacle of Greek architectural achievement, the Parthenon. This is a crucial mainstream historical fact built between 447 and 432 BCE on the Athenian Acropolis. The Parthenon is universally recognized as one of the most iconic and influential buildings in history, a masterpiece of Doric design incorporating subtle optical refinements. It is, quite simply, breathtaking. Imagine stepping back, letting the full scale of this marble wash over you. The sun glints off its honey-colored stone, softened by centuries of exposure. Its proportions feel instinctively right, a harmonious balance of strength and grace. Even in its ruined state, you can feel the power and majesty it once exuded. It's not just a building, it's a statement, a symbol of Athenian power, wealth, and intellectual prowess at the height of its golden age. You recall the Doric order's sturdy columns. Here, they stand with a perfected sense of balance, each one exhibiting the subtle swelling of entasis, making them appear perfectly straight and solid. The platform, the stylobate, gently curves upwards toward the center, preventing any optical illusion of sagging. Even the columns subtly lean inwards. All those meticulous refinements you just learned about are here, working in concert, creating a visual symphony of mathematical precision and artistic intuition. It's like a perfectly tuned instrument, every note hitting just right. Here's a quirky tidbit despite its overwhelming Doric character. The Parthenon cunningly incorporates elements of the Ionic order. Inside the outer Doric colonnade, encircling the cella, runs the continuous Panathenaic frieze, which we discussed earlier, a hallmark of the Ionic style. This innovative blend of orders, sometimes called mixed order, was highly unusual for its time and showcases the Athenian architect's willingness to break conventional rules to achieve a unique artistic vision. Imagine an ancient architectural purist having a mild heart attack upon seeing such a daring combination. The temple was dedicated to the goddess Athena Parthenos, Athena the Virgin, and once housed a colossal chryselephantine gold and ivory cult statue of the goddess, sculpted by the legendary Phidias. While the statue is long gone, you can almost feel its imposing presence within the cella, gleaming in the dim light, adding to the temple's aura of divine power. The Parthenon wasn't just a temple, it was Athens' treasury, holding valuable offerings and a symbol of their naval league's wealth. You walk around the perimeter, admiring the remnants of the metopes, depicting fierce battles, the Gigantomachy, Amazonomachy, Centauromachi, and scenes from the Trojan War. Above them, the grand pediments once told the stories of Athena's birth and her contest with Poseidon for Attica. Every surface was once alive with vibrant color, a stark contrast to the bleached marble we see today. Imagine the riot of blues, reds, and golds against the white stone. Historians still argue whether the Parthenon's primary purpose was religious, a grand home for Athena, or political, a lavish display of Athenian power and a monument to their victory over the Persians. Was it first and foremost a sacred space or a bold declaration of imperial might, funded by the treasury of the Delian League regardless? The Parthenon stands as an enduring testament to the genius of its architects, Ictinus and Callicrates, and its overseer, Phidias, creating a building that continues to inspire awe and intellectual debate millennia after its construction. You feel the weight of history here, the culmination of so much human effort and artistic aspiration. Having basked in the harmonious perfection of the Parthenon, you now turn your gaze towards a neighboring structure on the Athenian Acropolis, one that offers a striking contrast to the Parthenon's disciplined grandeur. You are now exploring the Erechtheion, a crucial mainstream historical fact that stands out for its unique, multi-level, and deliberately asymmetrical design, famously featuring the Porch of the Caryatids. If the Parthenon is the perfectly symmetrical older sibling, the Erechtheion is the charmingly eccentric younger one, full of delightful surprises. Imagine stepping from the broad, open space around the Parthenon into a more complex, almost labyrinthine area around the Erechtheion. Its irregular plan is immediately apparent. Instead of a single, uniform temple, you see a collection of distinct porches and levels, accommodating various sacred sites within its footprint. This architectural complexity arose from its purpose. It housed multiple ancient cults and sacred relics, including the olive tree planted by Athena, the saltwater spring created by Poseidon's trident, and the tomb of the legendary King Erechtheus. It's as if the architects were playing a high-stakes game of Tetris with sacred spaces. You notice that unlike the Parthenon, which faces east, the Erechtheion faces north, south, and east with different porticos. Its most famous feature, without a doubt, is the Masur Strobash of the Caryatids on its south side. Instead of traditional columns, you see six gracefully draped female figures, the Caryatids, supporting the roof. They stand with a relaxed contrapposto pose, their drapery echoing the fluting of columns, yet their human form adds a unique softness and elegance. You might find yourself staring, almost expecting them to sigh or shift their weight. So lifelike are they. Here's a quirky tidbit about the Caryatids. Their name is believed to derive from the women of Carii, a town in Laconia, who were known for their beautiful dances. Another theory suggests they were priestesses of Artemis from Carii. Whatever their exact origin, these sculpted maidens are an enduring symbol of the Erechtheion's unique charm. Imagine trying to explain to an ancient Athenian why you were so fascinated by stone women holding up a roof. But they're so realistic, you might exclaim. To a bewildered local, the Erechtheion also showcases the refined Ionic order, with its elegant volute capitals and slender columns, further distinguishing it from the Doric Parthenon. The northern porch, in particular, is noted for its exquisitely carved Ionic frieze and intricate ceiling coffers. The details here are astonishing, delicate and precise, suggesting a different artistic sensibility at play. The asymmetrical layout of the Erechtheion was not a design flaw but a deliberate solution to a complex problem: how to build a single structure that incorporated several highly revered and geographically fixed sacred spots on the uneven terrain of the Acropolis. The architects had to be incredibly inventive, adapting their designs to the exigencies of the site and the various cult requirements. It was a masterclass in architectural problem-solving under strict religious constraints. Historians still argue whether the Erechtheion's unique, composite design represents a departure from classical ideals of symmetry and order, or if it embodies a more sophisticated understanding of adapting architectural form to highly specific site conditions and religious functions. Was its asymmetry a sign of artistic freedom or merely a practical necessity? Regardless, the Erechtheion stands as a remarkable testament to Greek ingenuity, proving that even within a rich tradition, there was ample room for innovation and unique expression. You feel a sense of intimate wonder, appreciating this complex gem amidst the grand simplicity of its neighbors. Having absorbed the distinct personalities of the Parthenon and the Erechtheion, You now shift your position on the Athenian Acropolis, your gaze drawn to the monumental gateway that controls entry to this sacred precinct. You are now exploring the Puli Propylaea, a crucial mainstream historical fact that served as the grand ceremonial entrance to the Acropolis, combining both defensive and monumental architectural elements with remarkable ingenuity. It's not just a gate, it's a carefully orchestrated procession, a transition from the mundane world below to the divine realm above. Imagine approaching the Acropolis from the west, the ancient pathway winding upwards. As you near the summit, the Propylaea rises before you, a majestic structure of Pentelic marble. It's an imposing facade, symmetrical and grand, with a central passage flanked by two smaller wings. You feel a sense of anticipation building as you walk towards it, knowing that beyond lies the heart of ancient Athens. The Propylaea's design, attributed to the architect Mnesicles, is a masterpiece of complex planning, especially considering the uneven terrain. It incorporates features from both secular and sacred architecture. On the exterior, facing the city, it presents a Doric hexa-style facade, reminiscent of a temple, with 6 imposing columns. As you pass through the central gate, which once had large wooden doors, you enter a deep, columned hall. This transition from exterior formality to interior space is both functional and symbolic, guiding your movement. Here's a quirky tidbit about the Propylaea, one of its wings. The northern one contained the Mediana Pinacotheque, which was essentially an art gallery. It housed paintings, often on wooden panels, which visitors could admire before ascending to the temples. Imagine an ancient Athenian pausing to appreciate some fine art before heading off to worship a goddess. It's a delightful blend of culture and piety, suggesting that even in sacred spaces, there was room for aesthetic appreciation. You might even wonder what kind of art was popular back then. Perhaps abstract marble splatters, or highly realistic depictions of heroic deeds. Inside the central hall of the Propylaea, the columns transition from the sturdy Doric to the more slender and elegant Ionic order, supporting the ceiling of the central passage. This clever use of different orders within the same structure, much like the Parthenon's mixed orders, showcases the architect's sophistication and willingness to employ diverse styles for different functional and aesthetic effects. The ceiling of the central passage was adorned with painted coffers, adding another layer of decorative richness that is now largely lost to time. The Propylaea wasn't just about beauty, it was also a heavily fortified defensive structure. Its massive walls and gates were designed to control access and protect the sacred precinct, reflecting the practical realities of ancient city life. The central ramp for sacrificial animals and chariots, flanked by steps for pedestrians, further highlights its dual function as both a ceremonial and utilitarian gateway. You can almost hear the rumble of cartwheels and the murmur of pilgrims as they ascended. Historians still argue whether the Propylaea, in its ambitious design, was ever fully completed according to Mnesicles' original plans, as evidence suggests that the Peloponnesian War might have halted its construction prematurely. Was it a testament to a grand vision cut short by conflict, or did the finished structure sufficiently fulfill its intended purpose despite any potential incompleteness? Regardless, the Propylaea stands as a remarkable example of Greek architectural ingenuity, demonstrating how a functional entrance could be transformed into a monument of profound civic and religious significance, guiding every step of your journey towards the divine. Leaving the grandeur of the Acropolis, you now descend from the sacred heights into the bustling heart of the ancient Greek city. You are entering the Agora, a crucial mainstream historical fact that served as the central public space of ancient Greek city-states, functioning as the primary marketplace, meeting place, and civic center. If the Acropolis was the city's spiritual head, the Agora was its vibrant, beating pulse. Imagine stepping into a sprawling, open area, perhaps in Athens, where the air is alive with sounds and smells. You hear the chatter of merchants hawking their wares, the serious tones of philosophers debating under a shade tree, the excited shouts of citizens gathered for an assembly, and the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer from a nearby workshop. The scent of olives, fresh bread, and perhaps a faint whiff of unwashed humanity hangs in the air. This isn't a quiet, contemplative space. It's a dynamic, ever-changing tableau of daily life. The Agora was the focal point of civic activity. Here, citizens gathered to discuss politics, vote on laws, administer justice, and conduct business. It was the place where democracy truly lived and breathed, where every free male citizen had the right to speak and be heard. You might even find yourself instinctively straightening up, feeling the weight of ancient Athenian democracy in the very ground beneath your feet. Here's a quirky tidbit about the Agora. While it was primarily a public space, it was also surrounded by various public buildings. There would be stoas covered walkways, temples dedicated to civic deities, law courts, and the Bouleuterion Council House. Imagine trying to haggle for fish while simultaneously listening to a heated political speech emanating from a nearby building. Multitasking at its finest. Ancient style. You might even picture a philosopher trying to explain the virtues of logic, while a particularly persistent goat tries to nibble at his toga. The physical layout of the agora evolved over time. Early agoras might have been relatively informal, but over centuries they became more organized, with public buildings gradually defining the space. Paths would have been worn smooth by countless footsteps, and small monuments or statues would have dotted the area, commemorating heroes or important events. It was a place of memory as much as a place of present activity. You might observe a variety of social interactions, merchants negotiating prices, friends catching up, students learning from their teachers, and even the occasional public announcement being shouted by a herald. The agora was where news spread, rumors started, and reputations were made or broken. It was the original social network, far more immediate and tactile than anything you know today. Historians still argue whether the democratic ideals embodied in the Athenian agora were truly inclusive, or if the exclusion of women, slaves, and non-citizens from direct political participation meant it was a democracy only for a select few. Was the agora a beacon of ancient liberty, or a stage for a privileged class? Regardless, the agora stands as a powerful symbol of Greek civic life, a place where the foundational principles of Western democracy were debated, practiced, and enshrined, echoing through the very stones that once witnessed countless bustling days. You feel the vibrant pulse of ancient life, a stark contrast to the quiet solemnity of the temples, but equally essential to the fabric of their world. Having absorbed the vibrant energy of the agora, you now find your gaze drawn to the various buildings that defined its perimeter, offering shelter, shade, and specific functions within the bustling public space. Your attention settles on the hastoa, a crucial mainstream historical fact that refers to a long, covered walkway or portico, typically open on one side with a colonnade, and serving a multitude of public functions in ancient Greek architecture. These weren't just fancy corridors. They were the Swiss Army knives of ancient Greek urban design. Imagine a long, rectangular building, its roof supported by a row of columns facing the agora. The interior is cool and shaded, offering a welcome respite from the Mediterranean sun. You can picture yourself strolling along, enjoying the protection from the elements, perhaps pausing to observe the goings-on in the open square. The stoa was designed for lingering, for conversation, for casual encounters. It's like a perpetually open-air coffee shop, but without the Wi-Fi. Stoas could vary greatly in size and complexity. Some were simple, single-aisle structures, while others, like the Stoa Poikile painted stoa in Athens, were two-aisled with internal columns, and even featured famous wall paintings. The Stoa Poikile, in particular, became famous as the birthplace of Stoicism, a philosophical school whose adherents would gather and teach there. Imagine overhearing a debate about virtue and logic while you're just trying to buy some pottery. Here's a quirky tidbit about stoas: they were incredibly versatile. They served as marketplaces where merchants could set up stalls, art galleries showcasing paintings or sculptures, lecture halls for philosophers and rhetoricians, meeting places for various guilds or associations, and even temporary living quarters for people passing through. It was the ultimate multi-purpose building. You might even wonder if they had a designated lost and found corner for misplaced scrolls or sandals. The design of the stoa, with its open colonnade, allowed for light and air to penetrate while providing shelter. This blend of openness and enclosure made them ideal for a wide range of public activities that required both visibility and a degree of comfort. They helped define the edges of the agora, creating a sense of ordered space within the otherwise open square. You can almost hear the echoes of countless conversations, deals struck, and ideas exchanged within their cool confines. The materials used for stoas varied, from simpler timber and mud brick in earlier periods to more elaborate marble and limestone in later, wealthier cities. Regardless of material, their fundamental form remained consistent, a long, linear structure providing sheltered circulation and flexible space. They were the unsung heroes of ancient urban planning, facilitating social interaction and civic life in countless ways. Historians still argue whether the proliferation of stoas in Greek cities reflected a growing emphasis on public life and communal interaction, or if their development was primarily driven by practical needs such as shelter from the sun and rain in bustling marketplaces. Was it a conscious architectural statement about civic values, or simply a brilliant utilitarian solution? Regardless, the stoa stands as a testament to the Greek understanding of urban functionality, creating adaptable and welcoming spaces that served as the backdrop for much of their daily civic existence. You feel a sense of easy comfort within this imagined colonnade, appreciating its simple yet profound usefulness. Moving beyond the informal bustle of the stoa, you now approach a building that whispers of hushed debates, reasoned arguments, and the very foundations of democratic governance. You are standing before the Bouleuterion, a crucial mainstream historical fact that served as the council house or senate house in ancient Greek cities, where the Boule Council of Citizens met to conduct public affairs. This was the engine room of civic administration, where the gears of democracy ground, sometimes slowly, sometimes with a decisive clang. Imagine a relatively modest, often rectangular or square building, usually with tiers of benches arranged in a semicircle or a rectangle, facing a central space. There might be a speaker's platform or an altar in the middle. The atmosphere inside would have been serious, yet dynamic, filled with the murmur of voices, the rustle of papyrus scrolls, and the occasional emphatic declaration. You can almost feel the weight of communal decision-making settling on your shoulders. The Boule was a significant administrative body in many Greek city-states, responsible for preparing legislation, managing finances, and overseeing various aspects of city governance before proposals were put to the larger citizen assembly, the ecclesia. The Bouleuterion, therefore, was where the real legislative work happened, where proposals were hammered out and policies debated. It was the nerve center of the city's political life, far from the dramatic flair of the public assembly. Here's a quirky tidbit about some Bouleuteria later examples, especially in more democratic cities like Athens, were designed with consideration for acoustics, using clever arrangements of seating and sometimes even a central hearth to create a focal point for discussion. Imagine the difficulty of ensuring everyone could hear in an era before microphones. You might even picture an exasperated council member yelling, "Speak up! Themistocles! We can't hear you in the back row." The architecture of the Bouleuterion was typically functional rather than overtly grand, reflecting its utilitarian purpose. While some had elaborate facades, the interior was designed for efficiency and to facilitate deliberation. The tiered seating allowed members to see and hear each other, fostering a sense of community and shared responsibility. Roofs were often supported by internal columns, carefully placed to minimize obstruction of views. You might notice the humble nature of these structures compared to the magnificent temples. They were built for people, for the practicalities of governance, rather than for gods. Yet their significance cannot be overstated. It was within these relatively plain walls that the principles of self-governance were put into practice, shaping the very idea of citizenship and collective decision-making. Historians still argue whether the design of the Bouleuterian, with its emphasis on tiered seating, influenced the later development of the theatrical auditorium, or if both evolved independently from earlier forms of communal gathering spaces. Was there a direct architectural lineage or merely parallel innovations addressing similar needs for large groups to see and hear? Regardless, the Bouleuterian stands as a powerful symbol of Greek democratic ideals, a place where the collective voice of the citizens, however limited by ancient standards, found its administrative expression. You feel a quiet reverence for this space, knowing that momentous decisions, shaping the lives of thousands, were once made within its walls. Having explored the practical halls of governance, you now find yourself drawn by a different kind of murmur, a swelling chorus of anticipation and dramatic sighs. You are standing within a Schubertskongrichte theater, a crucial mainstream historical fact that served as the primary venue for dramatic performances, public assemblies, and religious festivals, renowned for its open-air design and exceptional acoustics. This wasn't just entertainment. It was a profound civic and religious experience, a cornerstone of ancient Greek culture. Imagine entering a vast, open-air bowl carved into a hillside, perhaps the Theater of Dionysus in Athens, or the perfectly preserved theater at Epidaurus. Rows upon rows of stone benches, the koilon sweep upwards in a semicircle, accommodating thousands of spectators. At the bottom, the circular orchestra is the primary performance area, where the chorus would sing and dance. Behind it, the skene, a building that served as a backdrop and changing room, would provide the stage for actors. You can almost feel the collective breath of the audience, hanging in the air, awaiting the next dramatic turn. The brilliance of Greek theater architecture lies in its ingenious use of natural topography. Hillside locations were ideal, allowing for efficient drainage and providing a ready-made slope for the seating. This not only saved on construction materials but also contributed to the remarkable acoustics. You might whisper something from the very top row and be astonished at how clearly your voice carries down to the orchestra. It's a bit like they discovered natural surround sound millennia ago. Here's a quirky tidbit about Greek theaters. The masks worn by actors weren't just for characterization. They also helped project the actors' voices. Some scholars believe that the design of the masks, combined with the theater's acoustics, essentially acted as rudimentary megaphones. Imagine trying to deliver a powerful soliloquy to 15,000 people without any electronic amplification. You'd need all the help you could get. You might even imagine an ancient stage manager yelling, "More projection! Sophocles! More projection!" The plays performed in these theaters, particularly tragedies and comedies, were not merely entertainment. They were deeply rooted in religious festivals, especially those honoring Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry. They explored profound philosophical questions, moral dilemmas, and the nature of humanity, serving as a form of public education and communal reflection. The audience wasn't just passive viewers. They were participants in a shared cultural and spiritual experience. You notice how the shape of the theater naturally draws your focus towards the orchestra, creating an intimate connection between performers and audience. Despite the vast numbers, the natural light of day provided illumination, and the sky served as the ultimate backdrop, adding to the epic scale of the performances. Historians still argue whether the primary function of Greek theater was religious worship, civic education, or pure entertainment. Was the performance of tragedy a sacred ritual first and foremost, or a didactic tool for shaping public morals, or simply a popular spectacle regardless? The Greek theater stands as an architectural marvel, a testament to their understanding of space, sound, and the communal experience, shaping the very foundation of Western dramatic arts. You feel a profound connection to the countless voices that once echoed here, bringing ancient stories to vibrant life under the open sky. Having witnessed the dramatic spectacle within the open-air theaters, your journey now takes you to spaces dedicated not to mental exertion, but to physical prowess and athletic competition. You are now exploring the stadia and gymnasia, crucial mainstream historical facts that served as venues for athletic contests, physical training, and intellectual discourse in ancient Greece. These were the arenas where bodies were honed, minds were sharpened, and the pursuit of excellence was celebrated. Imagine stepping onto a long, rectangular track, perhaps at the Olympic Games site, or within the training grounds of a typical Greek city. The Rung Stadium, the singular form of stadia, was specifically designed for foot races, typically 600 Greek feet long, around 180-200 meters, with parallel sides and a semicircular end. Spectator seating, often simple earthen banks or later stone benches, would line the track, allowing thousands to cheer on their favorite athletes. You can almost feel the pounding of bare feet on the packed earth, hear the shouts of encouragement and the gasps of the crowd. Adjacent to or near the stadium, you would often find the gymnasium. This wasn't just a place for physical exercise. It was a complex institution that included open areas for wrestling and discus throwing, covered porticos for training in bad weather, changing rooms and baths. But here's the twist: it also contained lecture halls and libraries, making it a center for intellectual activity as well. It was a holistic environment where the ideal of kalakagathia, the harmonious development of mind and body, was actively pursued. You might even chuckle at the idea of a philosopher giving a lecture on ethics while athletes are grunting and sweating nearby. Here's a quirky tidbit about Greek gymnasia. Athletes would often train and compete in the nude. This practice, reflected in the word gymnasium itself from gymnos, meaning naked, was rooted in the belief that the unadorned human body was a thing of beauty and a testament to divine creation. It also emphasized equality among competitors. Imagine the sheer awkwardness if you were to stumble upon such a scene today. You might even find yourself instinctively looking for a discreet corner to hide behind. The design of both stadia and gymnasia was largely functional, prioritizing space for movement and clear sight lines for spectators. Materials would have been local and sturdy: packed earth for tracks, timber for simple structures, and later cut stone for more permanent seating and buildings. The layout was typically linear for the stadium and more dispersed for the gymnasium, reflecting the different activities carried out in each. These venues were not merely for sport, they were deeply intertwined with religious festivals and civic identity. The Olympic Games, for instance, were a religious festival honoring Zeus, punctuated by athletic contests. Participation and success in these events brought immense honor to both the individual and their city-state. They were places where competitive spirit, physical discipline, and communal celebration converged. Historians still argue whether the Greek emphasis on nude athleticism was purely for aesthetic and religious reasons, or if it also served as a means of social stratification, distinguishing free citizens from slaves or foreigners. Was it an expression of physical ideals, or a subtle marker of social status? Regardless, stadia and gymnasia stand as testaments to the Greek reverence for the human body and mind, creating spaces where the pursuit of physical and intellectual excellence was actively fostered, shaping generations of citizens both strong in physique and sharp in thought. You feel a sense of invigorating energy, a reminder of the power of ancient ideals. After exploring the grand public venues, the sacred temples, the bustling agora, the dramatic theaters, and the vigorous stadia, your journey now takes a more intimate turn. You are about to peek into a less celebrated, yet fundamentally important aspect of ancient Greek life: their private homes. This is a crucial mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek domestic architecture, especially for ordinary citizens, was typically modest and functional, a stark contrast to the grandeur of their public and religious buildings. It was the backdrop for family life, hidden away from the public gaze. Imagine stepping off a dusty, unpaved street in an ancient Greek city. You find yourself facing a simple, unadorned wall, often made of sun-baked mud brick on a stone foundation, perhaps whitewashed. There are few windows facing the street, maintaining privacy and offering protection. The exterior gives little hint of the life within. It's a bit like a plain brown package that holds something precious inside. Most Greek houses were built around a central, open-air courtyard. All This courtyard was the heart of the home, providing light and ventilation to the surrounding rooms. You can imagine the family gathered here for meals, women performing domestic tasks, and children playing. It was also often where the well or cistern was located, a vital source of water. You might hear the gentle splashing of water or the clatter of pottery as a meal is prepared. Here's a quirky tidbit about these homes. While simple, they often had a dedicated space for the men, andron, and a separate area for the women, gynekon, especially in wealthier households. The andron was typically the best room, used for entertaining male guests at symposia drinking parties, and often elaborately decorated with painted plaster and mosaics. The women's quarters, in contrast, were generally more secluded and utilitarian. Imagine the men having their fancy man cave while the women were busy with all the actual work. You might even chuckle at the thought of an ancient Greek wife rolling her eyes as her husband's boisterous friends arrive. The rooms surrounding the courtyard would have been relatively small and specialized bedrooms, storerooms, a kitchen, and perhaps a small shrine to household gods. Furniture was minimal, simple wooden beds, stools, tables, and storage chests. Floors might be packed earth or simple pebble mosaics, and roofs were typically flat or gently pitched, covered with terracotta tiles. The overall impression is one of practicality and simplicity rather than ostentation. The materials used were dictated by local availability, and cost mud brick was common for walls due to its insulation properties, stone for foundations, and timber for roofs and doors. Construction methods were straightforward, relying on local labor and established techniques. These were not the works of master architects but of skilled builders adapting to everyday needs. You might notice the stark contrast between these humble dwellings and the magnificent public buildings we've explored. This distinction highlights a key aspect of Greek society, the emphasis on the collective and the divine over the individual and the private. Resources and artistic energy were poured into temples, civic buildings, and public spaces, reflecting a culture that prioritized communal identity and religious devotion. Historians still argue whether the apparent modesty of Greek private homes was purely a matter of economic necessity for the majority of the population, or if it also reflected a cultural value that downplayed individual wealth and emphasized civic contribution. Was it simply that they couldn't afford grander homes, or did they choose simplicity in their private lives? Regardless, these modest abodes provided the essential foundation for daily life, family, and community, serving as the often unseen bedrock of ancient Greek society. You feel a sense of quiet intimacy, appreciating the hidden world behind those unassuming walls. Having journeyed through the living spaces of ancient Greeks, both public and private, your path now leads to a quieter, more somber realm, yet one deeply imbued with architectural significance. You are about to explore tombs and memorials, a crucial mainstream historical fact that showcases how the Greeks used architecture to commemorate the deceased, express grief, and mark the transition from life to the afterlife. These structures range from simple grave markers to elaborate monumental tombs, each telling a story of remembrance. Imagine walking through an ancient necropolis, a city of the dead, just outside the bustling city walls. The air is still, punctuated only by the rustle of leaves or the distant call of a bird. You see a variety of grave markers. Some are simple stone slabs, perhaps with an engraved name. Others are more elaborate stelae, singular stelae, upright stone slabs often carved with scenes depicting the deceased, their families, or moments from their lives. These carvings are often deeply moving, capturing a sense of quiet dignity or tender farewell. You might notice a child playing with a pet, or a soldier in repose, immortalized in marble. The stelae, often crowned with a palmette or an anthemion, a decorative motif resembling a fan of leaves, was a common and elegant form of memorial. The carvings, often in low relief, provide invaluable insights into ancient Greek daily life, dress, and emotional expression. They're like ancient photographs offering a glimpse into personal histories that would otherwise be lost to time. Here's a quirky tidbit about Greek grave markers. While many are somber, Some were quite expressive, even depicting scenes of play or everyday activities, reflecting a view of death not just as an end, but as a continuation of existence or a transition to another realm. Imagine a gravestone showing someone happily enjoying a picnic. It might seem strange to us, but it speaks to a different cultural understanding of mortality. You might even find yourself smiling faintly at the thought of such a comforting depiction. Beyond individual stelae, you also encounter more substantial tombs, especially for prominent families or wealthy individuals. These could take various forms: rock-cut tombs, burial mounds, tumuli, or even small, temple-like structures. Remember the Mycenaean Tholos tombs, those impressive beehive structures. While from an earlier period, they illustrate a long tradition of monumental burial. Later, in the Hellenistic period, grander, more ornate funerary monuments became common, sometimes resembling miniature temples or elaborate altars. The architectural elements used in tombs often mirrored those found in living architecture: columns, pediments, and friezes, albeit on a smaller scale. This connection reinforced the idea that the deceased were still part of the community. Even in death, the materials varied from local stone to fine marble, depending on the status and wealth of the interred. These memorials weren't just places of burial, they were focal points for remembrance, places where families could mourn, honor their ancestors, and perform rituals. The very act of building and maintaining these structures was an expression of piety and familial duty. They stood as enduring links between the living and the dead, a physical manifestation of memory. Historians still argue whether the evolving complexity and grandeur of Greek funerary architecture primarily reflected changing religious beliefs about the afterlife, or if it was more a reflection of increasing social stratification and the desire for conspicuous display of wealth. Did it signify a deeper spiritual shift, or merely a growing emphasis on earthly status beyond the grave? Regardless, Greek tombs and memorials stand as profound architectural expressions of human grief, remembrance, and the enduring desire to leave a lasting mark in the face of mortality. You feel a quiet weight in this space, a poignant reminder of lives lived and remembered long ago. Having paid your respects to the architectural expressions of remembrance, you now turn your attention to a more life-sustaining, yet equally impressive facet of ancient Greek engineering and architecture. You are about to delve into their Konowarnawan, a crucial mainstream historical fact that highlights the sophisticated systems of aqueducts, fountains, and drainage Greeks developed to provide essential water to their cities and manage waste. This wasn't just about convenience. It was about public health, urban growth, and survival. Imagine standing on a hillside, observing a carefully constructed channel, perhaps partially underground or supported by a low wall, snaking its way across the landscape. This is an aqueduct designed to transport fresh water from distant springs or rivers to urban centers. The Greeks might not have built the towering, multi-arch Roman aqueducts you often see in pictures, but their systems were incredibly effective, often utilizing tunnels, canats, or siphons to navigate challenging terrain. You might even hear the faint gurgle of water flowing through unseen conduits. The engineering required to maintain a consistent, gentle slope over many miles, ensuring continuous water flow, was remarkable. They had to account for topography, geology, and the sheer force of gravity. It's a bit like building a very, very long, invisible water slide for water, where the slight incline is everything. Here's a quirky tidbit about Greek water systems. Some cities, like the ancient city of Samos, boasted incredibly ambitious and technologically advanced tunnels, like the Tunnel of Eupalinos. This 136-meter-long tunnel, dug from both ends simultaneously through a mountain using sophisticated surveying techniques, provided water to the city. Imagine two teams digging towards each other through solid rock, relying on incredibly precise calculations to meet in the middle. You might even picture the moment of breakthrough, with shouts of joy and perhaps a few nervous glances to see if they were wildly off course. Once the water reached the city, it was distributed through a network of pipes, often made of terracotta or lead, leading to public fountains. These wine fountains were not just functional, they were often beautifully designed, incorporating sculptural elements and architectural flourishes, serving as public gathering points where citizens could collect fresh water. Imagine the chatter and social interaction around these communal water sources, as important as any marketplace. Beyond supplying fresh water, the Greeks also understood the importance of managing wastewater. While not as extensive as Roman sewer systems, Greek cities had basic drainage channels to carry away stormwater and some waste, preventing standing water and improving urban hygiene. This foresight in sanitation, though rudimentary by modern standards, was vital for preventing disease in densely populated areas. The development of these complex waterworks demonstrates a strong grasp of practical engineering and a commitment to urban infrastructure. They were public works, requiring communal effort and significant investment, reflecting a societal understanding of the crucial role water played in sustaining a thriving polis. Historians still argue whether the level of sophistication in Greek water management was primarily driven by pragmatic concerns for public health and population growth, or if it also reflected a philosophical appreciation for order and control over the natural environment. Was it purely utilitarian, or did it embody deeper societal values? Regardless, Greek aqueducts, fountains, and drainage systems stand as powerful testaments to their innovative spirit, creating essential lifelines that sustain their vibrant cities for centuries. You feel a refreshing sense of their ingenuity, understanding the unseen forces that allowed these ancient civilizations to flourish. Having traced the vital flow of water through ancient Greek cities, your perspective now widens, encompassing the broader organizational principles that shape their urban environments. You are now delving into city planning, a crucial mainstream historical fact that highlights the Greek shift from organic, often chaotic, early settlements to more deliberate, organized layouts, particularly through the adoption of grid systems and the thoughtful spatial organization of public and private zones. This wasn't just about putting buildings down, it was about creating a functional, aesthetically pleasing, and politically significant urban fabric. Imagine looking down upon a newly planned Greek city, perhaps like Miletus or Priene in Asia Minor, rather than the more organically grown Athens. What strikes you immediately is the regularity, the sense of order. Streets intersect at right angles, forming a grid of insulae blocks of roughly equal size. This systematic layout, often attributed to the architect Hippodamus of Miletus, was a radical departure from the winding, irregular streets of older cities. It's like switching from a tangled ball of yarn to a neatly woven tapestry. The grid system wasn't just about neatness, it had profound practical benefits. It simplified property division, made navigation easier, and facilitated the efficient distribution of services like water and drainage. It also offered a more equitable division of land. As each plot was roughly the same size, you might even find yourself drawing imaginary lines on the ground, appreciating the clarity of such a plan. Here's a quirky tidbit about Hippodamus of Miletus. Often considered the father of urban planning, he wasn't just an architect. He was also a philosopher and a political theorist. He believed that the rational layout of a city could influence the character of its citizens and promote a more harmonious society. Imagine your city planner also being your resident philosopher, designing your roads to make you a better person. You might even chuckle at the idea of him pondering the existential implications of a cul-de-sac. Within this rational grid, Greek city planners also carefully distinguished between different zones. The public spaces, the agora, temples, theaters, and gymnasia were strategically located, often at the city's heart or on prominent hills, reflecting their importance in civic life. Residential areas, with their more modest homes, occupied the remaining blocks. This deliberate separation of functions created a clear hierarchy of space and a logical flow for urban activities. The city walls, often fortified with towers and gates, were another critical element of Greek city planning, defining the boundary between the civilized space and the untamed outside world. Roads, while perhaps not always paved, were designed to connect key areas and facilitate movement within the city into its ports or agricultural lands. The development of systematic city planning reflected a growing sense of rationalism and order in Greek thought. It wasn't just about building individual structures, but about creating an entire urban environment that functioned efficiently and embodied the values of the polis. These planned cities often served as colonial outposts, allowing the Greeks to transplant their culture and ideals to new territories. Historians still argue whether the adoption of grid planning was primarily a pragmatic response to the needs of colonial expansion and land division, or if it also represented a philosophical ideal of geometric perfection and a desire to impose human order upon nature. Was it born of necessity or from a profound intellectual conviction? Regardless, Greek city planning stands as a testament to their foresight and organizational genius, laying the groundwork for urban development that would influence cities for millennia. Right up to the very patterns you might recognize in modern metropolises, you feel a sense of clarity, seeing how ancient minds structured their world. Having envisioned the grand schemes of Greek city planning, you now zoom in, focusing on the fundamental components that made these magnificent structures a reality. You are now exploring the materials and techniques employed by ancient Greek builders, a crucial mainstream historical fact that reveals their masterful use of readily available natural resources and their ingenious methods for shaping and assembling monumental architecture. This wasn't just about design, it was about the physical act of creation, sweat, and geological fortune. Imagine standing in a quarry, the air thick with dust, the rhythmic clang of hammers on stone echoing around you. The primary material that comes to mind, of course, is marble, even specifically the pristine white Pentelic marble from quarries near Athens, or the fine Parian marble, renowned for its translucent quality. But the Greeks also extensively used limestone, often faced with stucco and painted to resemble more expensive marble. These stones were the bedrock of their monumental architecture. You might even feel the cool, smooth texture of an imagined marble fragment in your hand, marveling at its density. The process of extracting these massive blocks was a feat in itself. Quarrymen would identify fault lines or natural fissures in the rock, then use iron wedges hammered into drilled holes. These holes would then be filled with water, which, upon freezing overnight, would expand and split the rock. Or, in warmer climates, dry wooden wedges would be soaked with water to achieve the same effect. It's a surprisingly simple yet incredibly effective method, demonstrating an intuitive understanding of natural forces. Here's a quirky tidbit about their tools. While you might imagine elaborate machinery, the Greeks relied primarily on remarkably simple hand tools, bronze chisels, mallets, saws, and drills. Iron tools were later adopted, offering greater durability. Imagine the sheer muscle power and painstaking precision required to carve intricate details or smooth vast surfaces using only these basic instruments. You might even picture a weary sculptor, wiping sweat from his brow, muttering about needing a better chisel. Once extracted, the blocks were roughly shaped at the quarry to reduce their weight before being transported. Transportation was another immense challenge, often involving rolling the colossal stones on logs, dragging them on sledges, or loading them onto specially designed boats for sea transport. Remember those cyclopean walls? The technology, though rudimentary, was incredibly effective for its time. At the construction site, the blocks were meticulously dressed, with surfaces smoothed and joints precisely fitted. The famous dry masonry technique meant that blocks were often laid without mortar, relying on their exact fit and weight for stability. Metal clamps and dowels, usually made of iron or bronze, would be used to secure adjacent blocks, hidden within mortises cut into the stone. These hidden elements provided additional strength, ensuring the structures could withstand earthquakes and the test of time. The precision of their stonework is astonishing. Surfaces were often so finely polished that blocks fit together with barely visible seams, a testament to the skill of the masons. This level of craftsmanship, combined with their understanding of structural principles, allowed them to create buildings that have endured for millennia. Historians still argue whether the Greeks developed their stoneworking techniques independently or if they were significantly influenced by earlier Egyptian and Near Eastern traditions of monumental stone construction. Was it a pure Hellenic innovation or a masterful adaptation of inherited knowledge regardless? The materials and techniques employed by ancient Greek builders showcase an extraordinary blend of practical ingenuity, artistic sensibility, and sheer human effort, transforming raw earth into enduring masterpieces that still stand today. You feel a deep connection to those ancient hands that shaped the very stones you are now imagining. Having explored the raw materials and the precise tools used by Greek builders, your imagination now shifts to the colossal undertaking of actually erecting these magnificent structures. You are about to delve into construction logistics, a crucial mainstream historical fact that highlights the immense planning, labor, and ingenious methods required to move, lift, and assemble the massive stone components of ancient Greek temples and public buildings. This wasn't just building, it was an organizational feat on a truly heroic scale. Imagine a construction site in ancient Greece, perhaps the Acropolis during the building of the Parthenon. It's a hive of activity, a cacophony of sounds, the creak of ropes, the shouts of foremen, the rhythmic grunts of laborers, and the scrape of stone against stone. The scale of the operation is staggering, involving hundreds, even thousands of skilled craftsmen and unskilled laborers. It's like watching a monumental ballet, except with very heavy props and no music. The first major challenge was lifting the colossal stone blocks. The Greeks didn't have cranes as we know them today, with complex gears and steel cables. Instead, they relied on ingenious systems of pulleys, levers, and wooden derricks. Small hole, called anatheroses, were sometimes drilled into the ends of blocks to insert ropes or lifting tongs. For larger blocks, temporary wooden frameworks and scaffolding would be erected around the building. Imagine the precise coordination required to slowly hoist a multi-ton column capital into place, inch by painstaking inch, using only brute force and mechanical advantage. Here's a quirky tidbit about their lifting techniques. Some larger blocks, especially for roof beams, were not lifted from above but walked into place using a series of rollers and levers. They might have even used elaborate wooden sledges that slid along grease tracks. Imagine literally walking a 60-ton block of marble up a ramp, perhaps with the aid of hundreds of oxen or slaves. It's a reminder that sometimes the simplest ideas, scaled up immensely, are the most effective. You might even picture an ancient supervisor shouting, "Left a bit, no, too much." Just there, once lifted, the precise fitting of the blocks was paramount. As we discussed, they often used dry masonry, meaning no mortar. Instead, the blocks were cut with such astonishing accuracy that they fit together almost seamlessly. Anathyrosis, smoothing only the edges of the block faces that would meet, leaving the center slightly recessed, ensured a perfect fit with minimal friction, speeding up the process. This meticulous attention to detail at every stage, from quarry to final placement, is what allowed their structures to endure. The use of iron or bronze, dowels and clamps, often shaped like double T's or H's, was crucial for securing the blocks together, especially for earthquake resistance. These metal pieces would be inserted into precisely cut channels in the stone and then often sealed with molten lead to prevent corrosion and keep them firmly in place. It's like assembling a giant, incredibly heavy Lego set, but with far higher stakes if you get a piece wrong. The logistical planning involved was immense. Architects and master builders had to coordinate the quarrying, transport, cutting, sculpting, and lifting of thousands of individual pieces, ensuring they arrived at the site in the correct sequence and were ready for placement. It required a profound understanding of geometry, mechanics, and human resource management. Historians still argue whether the primary labor force for these massive construction projects consisted mostly of free citizens and skilled craftsmen, or if enslaved people played a more significant role in the heavy lifting and arduous tasks. Was it a collaborative civic effort or largely built on coerced labor? Regardless, the construction logistics of ancient Greek architecture stand as a staggering testament to human ingenuity, determination, and organizational prowess, transforming abstract designs into concrete realities that continue to inspire awe millennia later. You feel the ghost of ancient muscle and brilliant planning in the very air around these colossal ruins. Having grasped the monumental effort involved in lifting and placing the massive stones, your perception of Greek architecture now undergoes a vibrant transformation. You are about to discover color in antiquity, and a crucial mainstream historical fact that reveals Greek temples and sculptures. Far from being the pristine white marble we often envision today, were originally adorned with vibrant, often bold, painted surfaces. This isn't just a stylistic detail, it's a complete reimagining of their visual world. Imagine standing before a newly completed Greek temple, not the bleached, weathered ruin you've seen in pictures, but a dazzling spectacle of color. The Doric triglyphs would have been painted a deep blue, their recessed grooves a rich red. The metopes, with their dramatic sculptures, would have featured figures painted in lifelike hues, flesh tones, colorful drapery, and perhaps even gold leaf on armor or divine attributes. The pedimental sculptures would have been a riot of blues, reds, yellows, and greens, bringing the mythological scenes to vivid life. You might even feel a slight jolt of surprise at this unexpected vibrancy. It's like finding out that all those black and white photos from history were actually taken in glorious Technicolor. The use of paint wasn't random or arbitrary. It followed specific conventions and served multiple purposes. It helped to highlight architectural details, making moldings and carvings pop from a distance. It also enhanced the legibility of sculpted narratives, making the stories on pediments and friezes easier to understand for a largely non-literate populace. And, of course, it simply added to the overall beauty and splendor of the structure, transforming cool stone into a vibrant, living presence. Here's a quirky tidbit about ancient Greek paint. The pigments were derived from natural minerals and organic sources, reds from ochre, blues from Egyptian blue, a synthetic pigment, greens from copper compounds, and yellows from arsenic sulfides. These pigments were mixed with a binder, likely wax or egg tempera, and applied directly to the stone. Imagine the dedicated artists, painstakingly applying layer after layer of vibrant color, often working high up on scaffolding, perhaps humming a tune as they painted a god's flowing beard. You might even picture a particularly clumsy painter accidentally dripping blue paint on a passing dignitary. While much of this paint has faded or washed away over millennia, traces can still be found today, particularly in protected areas or where certain pigments have left faint stains on the stone. Modern technologies like UV light and laser scanning are also revealing astonishing new insights into the original polychromy, allowing scholars to reconstruct the likely appearance of these ancient masterpieces. You realize that our modern aesthetic preference for unadorned white marble is largely a product of the Renaissance and Neoclassical periods, when artists and architects rediscovered Greek ruins that had long lost their original coloration. They mistakenly assumed the Greeks intended their buildings to be white, and thus perpetuated a myth that has only recently begun to be truly challenged. Historians still argue whether the Greek use of bold, primary colors on their architecture was primarily for aesthetic enhancement, to make the buildings more visually striking and appealing, or if it also carried symbolic or religious significance, perhaps associating certain colors with specific deities or concepts. Was it pure decoration, or a coded language of color? Regardless, the discovery of color in antiquity utterly transforms our understanding of Greek architecture, revealing a world far more dazzling and visually audacious than previously imagined. A world that truly burst with life. You feel a sense of wonder at this vibrant revelation, painting a new picture in your mind's eye. With the vibrant colors of ancient Greek architecture now firmly painted in your mind, your attention shifts from the finished masterpiece to the brilliant minds and powerful patrons who conceived and funded these extraordinary projects. You are now exploring the roles of architects and their patrons, a crucial mainstream historical fact that highlights the collaborative relationship between creative genius and financial backing that was essential for the construction of monumental Greek buildings. This wasn't just about vision, it was about resources, influence, and political will. Imagine the bustling scene on the Acropolis as the Parthenon rises. You see not just an army of laborers, but also figures like Ictinus and Callicrates, the architects credited with its design, and Phidias, the master sculptor overseeing the artistic program. These were not mere draftsmen. They were highly skilled individuals, combining artistic vision with a profound understanding of engineering, mathematics, and logistics. They were the celebrity designers of their day, though perhaps without the endless talk show appearances. The role of the architect in ancient Greece, while respected, was perhaps less glorified than in later periods. They were often referred to as architekton, meaning master builder, indicating a hands-on, practical involvement in the construction process from start to finish. They would draw up plans, oversee the quarrying and transport of materials, manage the workforce, and ensure the precise execution of the design. It's a bit like being a combination of a modern architect, structural engineer, and project manager, all rolled into one toga. Here's a quirky tidbit about ancient Greek architects, unlike many modern architects who might design buildings far from their direct supervision. Greek architects were often deeply involved on site. They would literally be there, directing workers, solving problems on the fly, and ensuring the quality of the masonry. Imagine Ictinus himself, climbing scaffolding, arguing with a mason about the precise angle of a fluting, or Phidias personally supervising the carving of a meadow. You might even picture them exasperatedly tearing their hair out over a shipment of slightly too small marble blocks. The patrons, on the other hand, were the powerful individuals or, more often, the city-state itself, typically through its government. In Athens, during the Golden Age, figures like Pericles were instrumental in commissioning and funding massive public works programs, including the Parthenon and other Acropolis buildings. These projects served multiple purposes for the patrons. They displayed civic piety, honored the gods, provided employment for citizens, and, crucially, projected the city's wealth, power, and cultural supremacy to the wider Greek world. It was an ancient form of soft power, built in stone. The relationship between architect and patron was symbiotic. The architect provided the vision and expertise, while the patron provided the resources and the political mandate. Without a powerful and wealthy patron, many of these grand architectural dreams would have remained just that, dreams. These public works were often funded by public treasuries, sometimes supplemented by tribute from allied states, particularly in the case of Athens and its Delian League. Historians still argue whether the brilliance of Greek architecture was primarily due to the exceptional individual genius of its architects, or if it was more a reflection of the collective societal values and abundant resources provided by a flourishing city-state and its powerful patrons. Was it about the singular vision of a few, or the collective will and wealth of the many? Regardless, the collaborative dance between visionary architects and ambitious patrons was the driving force behind the creation of the timeless masterpieces of ancient Greek architecture, a testament to what can be achieved when creativity meets the means to bring it to life. You feel a profound appreciation for both the brilliant minds and the enabling power behind these ancient wonders. Having admired the genius of the architects and the power of their patrons, your journey now brings you face to face with the harsh realities of time, conflict, and nature. You are now exploring the theme of its destruction and preservation, a crucial mainstream historical fact that reveals how centuries of war, natural disasters, human neglect, and sometimes deliberate transformation have shaped the ruins of ancient Greek architecture that we see today. This isn't just about what was built, it's about what survived and how. Imagine looking at the Parthenon today. It's a magnificent ruin, yes, but it bears the scars of immense trauma. You see gaping holes where roof timbers once lay, broken columns, and absent sculptures. What happened Unlike modern buildings, which often face demolition for new construction, ancient Greek structures primarily succumbed to a relentless barrage of forces over millennia. It's like watching a majestic ship slowly being battered by endless storms. One of the most significant agents of destruction was warfare, wanery. Cities were besieged, sacked, and temples were deliberately destroyed by conquering armies as acts of desecration or to break the spirit of the vanquished. The Persian destruction of the Athenian Acropolis in 480 BCE, which predates the Parthenon, is a prime example, prompting the Athenians to swear an oath to rebuild. Later, the Venetian bombardment of the Acropolis in 1687 during a siege against the Ottoman Turks directly hit the Parthenon, which was then being used as a gunpowder magazine. The resulting explosion blew out the entire central part of the building, turning it into the ruin we largely see today. You might hear the distant echo of cannons, a sharp, jarring contrast to the quiet beauty. Here's a quirky tidbit about preservation or lack thereof. Many ancient Greek temples were converted into churches and later mosques. While this often meant altering the interior, removing cult statues, and adding new features, it also, paradoxically, ensured their survival. A building that was continuously used and adapted for new religious purposes was less likely to be completely dismantled for its stone than one left abandoned. Imagine the irony: a pagan temple saved by monotheistic conversion. You might even picture an ancient priest grumbling about having to pray in a building filled with heathen carvings. Natural disasters also played a significant role. Earthquakes, prevalent in the seismically active Greek world, toppled columns and cracked foundations. Fires, whether accidental or as a result of conflict, consumed wooden roofs and interior furnishings, leaving only the stone shells. The slow, relentless erosion of wind and rain also wore down surfaces, softened details, and caused structures to crumble over vast stretches of time. Finally, human neglect and repurposing contributed. Abandoned buildings were often quarried for their stone, which was reused in new constructions. Marble sculptures were sometimes burned to make lime, or smashed simply because their pagan imagery was deemed offensive by later religious zealots. This cyclical process of decay, reuse, and occasional deliberate destruction means that what we see today is often a fragmented shadow of the original. Historians still argue whether the removal of the Parthenon sculptures by Lord Elgin in the early 19th century, controversial as it is today, ultimately aided in their preservation from further damage and environmental degradation, or if it was an unforgivable act of cultural vandalism. Was it salvation or plunder? Regardless, the story of destruction and preservation is integral to understanding Greek architecture. Every standing column, every fragment of sculpture is a survivor, a testament to endurance against overwhelming odds, a whisper of a grand past that refuses to be entirely silenced. You feel the weight of these vanished glories, a poignant reminder of impermanence and resilience. Having witnessed the forces of destruction and the enduring remnants of Greek architecture, your journey now brings you to a profound realization. The legacy of these ancient structures extends far beyond their ruined forms. You are now exploring the modern legacy's enduring echo, a crucial mainstream historical fact that highlights the profound and continuous influence of ancient Greek architecture on subsequent eras, from Roman antiquity to the Renaissance, neoclassicism, and even into modern design. This isn't just history, it's a living tradition that continues to shape the built world around you. Imagine walking through the streets of Rome, and suddenly you recognize the familiar fluted columns, the distinctive volutes, the sturdy proportions. The Romans, practical and expansive, adopted and adapted Greek architectural forms wholesale, often on a grander, more ornate scale. The Pantheon in Rome, for example, with its massive portico, directly echoes Greek temple fronts, even if its interior dome is a distinctly Roman innovation. You see Greek orders adorning triumphal arches, basilicas, and imperial palaces, It's like discovering that your favorite modern band was heavily influenced by a classical composer. Then, fast forward to the Renaissance. In Europe, as scholars and artists rediscovered classical antiquity, Greek architectural principles, often filtered through Roman interpretations, became the bedrock of a new artistic movement. Architects like Andrea Palladio meticulously studied ancient ruins, publishing treatises that codified the classical orders and their proportions. His villas and churches, and those of his contemporaries, consciously evoked the harmony and balance of Greek design. You might notice the symmetrical facades, the orderly rows of columns, and the triangular pediments crowning doorways on buildings from this era. Here's a quirky tidbit about this enduring influence: the neoclassical movement of the 18th and 19th centuries took this admiration to another level, directly attempting to emulate and revive Greek and Roman forms. This era saw a renewed emphasis on purity, simplicity, and monumental scale, often in reaction to the perceived excesses of Baroque and Rococo styles. Think of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., a direct, unashamed homage to the Parthenon. You might even chuckle at the idea of a 19th century architect proudly declaring, "My building is more Greek than your building." Even in the 20th and 21st centuries, the echo persists. While modern architecture embraced new materials and forms, the underlying principles of proportion, balance, and the organization of space still subtly inform design. The classical orders, even if abstracted or reinterpreted, remain part of the architectural vocabulary, a testament to their timeless appeal and adaptability. You see columns hinted at in skyscraper facades, or classical symmetry underpinning contemporary designs. The Greek legacy isn't just about direct copying. It's about the transmission of a profound architectural grammar, their invention of the orders, their pursuit of optical perfection, their understanding of human scale within monumental structures, and their integration of art and architecture laid down foundational principles that have been endlessly reinterpreted and reimagined across cultures and centuries. Historians still argue whether the continuous adoption of Greek architectural forms throughout history represents a timeless aesthetic ideal, a fundamental truth about beauty, or if it's more a reflection of cultural hegemony and the enduring power of Western classical education. Is it truly universal, or a culturally specific inheritance? Regardless, the enduring echo of ancient Greek architecture is undeniable, a powerful thread woven through the fabric of global architectural history. You feel a deep connection to this continuous lineage, recognizing that the whimsical world you've explored is not just buried in the past, but lives on, all around you, in countless forms. As the echoes of Greek architecture resonate through the ages, your final step on this whimsical journey takes you beyond the physical stones, beyond the grand designs, into the very core of what made it all possible, the underlying philosophical ideals. You are now reflecting on how the Greek architecture embodied their philosophical ideals, a crucial mainstream historical fact that reveals the deep connection between their pursuit of logic, harmony, balance, and humanism, and the physical structures they erected. This wasn't just building, it was philosophy cast in marble. Imagine the philosophers of ancient Greece, Plato, Aristotle, Pythagoras, pondering the nature of reality, beauty, and the ideal. Their ideas, often abstract, found concrete expression in the buildings around them. The relentless pursuit of harmony and proportion in Greek architecture, for instance, directly reflects their belief in a cosmic order governed by mathematical principles. Pythagoras found harmony in numbers. The architects found it in the precise ratios of column diameters to heights, or the spacing of their fluting. The Parthenon, with its perfect ratios, is a physical manifestation of this philosophical quest for ideal forms. You might almost hear a faint, ethereal hum of mathematical perfection emanating from the columns. The concept of balance between strength and grace, between decorative detail and structural clarity, is another hallmark. The sturdy Doric and the elegant Ionic weren't just stylistic choices. They represented different facets of an underlying search for equilibrium. This reflected a broader philosophical emphasis on moderation and avoiding extremes. The famous nothing in excess mantra. You can almost feel the gentle push and pull of opposing forces, resolved into a serene stability. Here's a quirky tidbit: the optical refinements we discussed, like in Tassis and the curved stylobate, aren't just about visual correction. They also speak to a philosophical understanding of human perception. The Greeks recognized that the human eye is imperfect, and that true perfection in art isn't just about mathematical precision, but about how that precision is perceived. It's a sophisticated understanding that art must account for the viewer's experience. Imagine an ancient Greek architect explaining to a client, "No, it's not actually straight, but it looks straight, and that's what truly matters for the soul." You might even chuckle at their cunning psychological insights. Furthermore, Greek architecture, particularly its human scale and accessibility, unlike the colossal, god-king focused architecture of Egypt or Mesopotamia, embodied their profound humanism. Temples were designed to be approached, admired, and understood by people. The sculptures on pediments and friezes, even when depicting gods, often showed them engaged in very human-like dramas. This focus on humanity as the measure of all things, a central tenet of Greek philosophy, is literally built into their structures. You feel a comforting sense of recognition, a celebration of your own form reflected in the very stones. The democratic spaces, the agora, the bouleuterion, the theaters, also served as physical manifestations of their political philosophies. These were places designed for civic participation, for public discourse, for the collective life of the polis in. The architecture facilitated their way of life, enabling the very dialogues and debates that shaped their intellectual legacy. Historians still argue whether the philosophical underpinnings of Greek architecture were explicitly articulated by the architects themselves, or if they were more a subconscious reflection of the broader cultural and intellectual climate of the time. Was there a direct theoretical framework, or was it an intuitive embodiment of shared societal values? Regardless, the structures you've explored are not just stone and mortar. They are tangible expressions of a civilization's deepest thoughts and aspirations, reflecting a worldview that sought order, beauty, and meaning in the world around them. You feel a sense of profound closure, understanding that the whimsical world of ancient Greek architecture is ultimately a reflection of the whimsical, yet deeply intellectual, world of the ancient Greek mind. Now, as the final echoes of our journey gently fade, imagine the soft glow of moonlight illuminating these ancient stones, softened by the passage of countless centuries. The bustling sounds of ancient life have long since fallen silent, replaced by the hushed whispers of the night. The grand temples, the vibrant agoras, the dramatic theaters, they all now stand as quiet sentinels, bathed in silver, their stories told, their lessons learned. Feel the cool air, perhaps a gentle breeze drifting past, carrying the scent of olive groves and wild herbs. Your mind, full of Doric might and Ionic grace, of intricate carvings and ingenious refinements, is ready to rest. The weighty thoughts of ancient philosophy can now gently dissolve into the comfortable quiet. Let the images of magnificent marble, bathed in starlight, guide you deeper into slumber. You are safe, enveloped by the stillness of history. Good night. Sweet dreams.